Okay. So there's a sort of separation in or layering in my view of between machines and end users, and then all the industries that come between them. This is kind of a vertical split. If you think about like if one company owns the whole stack from top to bottom, or horizontal split if you think that there are specific companies that specialize in each of these roles. But the gaming section is something I carved out towards the end. With game AI, procedural generation, physics engines, massively multiplayer backends, none of which are normal things. But GDC, Game Dev Conf is one of the conferences that I really like to look at because a lot of ideas start in gaming and then make their way into regular dev careers, which I think is really useful to use for inspiration. So yeah, we talked about the business models, agencies, advertising, subscription, marketplaces, gaming, and then that's like the standard stuff that I want people to know about, where they're increasingly productizing their work, right? First, you start out with being paid for your time, then you start out being paid for other people's time, then you start out being paid over time by some product that people subscribe to. Then you also start building in a marketplace where you're using network effects to power both sides of the business. The recent, I'd say the platform versus aggregator approach is a more recent trend in business analysis, I would say, and probably driven by Ben Thompson, who is the main person who coined the term aggregator as an opposition or as a complement to the concept of platforms. Platforms are a lot older, something like Bill Gates era. So I highly recommend checking out all these ideas because I really think that this is one of my best primers I've ever written about all these concepts and how they fit together that you'll ever see. Even if you go to Ben Thompson's own website where he talks about aggregation theory, it's not super clear. And he has quite a few concepts. Like this is his definition of aggregation theory that you have to read through. So if you have the time, you're definitely welcome to go through all of that. But I basically tried to summarize it in like 2 pages for you, what this aggregation theory is about. So, welcome to take note of it either way, but just know that it's important enough that Apple starts quoting him for their business strategy. Okay, and then other strategic perspectives, I put in a bunch of last minute things here about open source, about land grab, and about categorical imperatives. So you can basically this is an open field. I don't want to rehash the essay for you, but this is, I think, one of the most important chapters in the book. And because it's chapter 27, most people don't even get here. And it's downstream of all of the finance stuff, right? Like figure out the business model. Each of these business models have some association with gross margin, what's association with churn, like marketplace a very high churn. Some of them do, some of them don't. So for example, we even talked about take rates on marketplaces. We even talked about on aggregators. Where's the Airbnb model? Airbnb marketplaces. Okay. There we go. Okay. Supply and transaction costs. Like basically, these are all forms of aggregators. Some of them are marketplaces and some are more content-driven places, but all of them aggregate some supply in some context and they have different levels of supply. So I just think it's basically what I try to do is present multiple ways of looking at the same thing, and just giving you the tools to analyze business strategy based on whether it's horizontal, vertical, or based on business model, or based on whether it's an aggregator or not. And I think these are just some of the most powerful concepts I've ever come across. Does anyone have things they want to focus on given that high-level intro?
Where do you think niche businesses fall in the picture, like the vertical-oriented software business?
I definitely think so. Can you define a niche business?
Something, for example, the company that I work for does legal software, like software for legal teams, right? And even there are venture-funded ones too, like Everlaw and ones like that, that are focused on serving a certain niche.
Yeah.
right? And sometimes they may just be selling software, but it and not necessarily subscriptions, or it's a combination of subscription and software and professional services, right? That's
So
is that like is that a different way to slice it? There's probably
I think
ways
that
to
would be
slice it.
vertical software. Yeah, so that would be vertical software. And yeah, I mean, I think there's it looks like yeah, okay. It looks like there's some definitions here that you might be able to pull from. But I mean, yeah, it's totally, you know, some combination of vertical computer industry plus probably some kind of subscription, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like you're
It's
probably seat-based subscription, like per number of users, you have some package or whatever.
yeah, you develop as part of, you know, if you work in a certain niche, even gaming is something like that, but you can even within that, there can be subcategories where you can get really deep into and carry the domain knowledge with you as a
Yeah,
developer. Like even like trading, right? Like
yeah,
you develop trading specific skill sets, and that's not that adds value as part of your career too,
yeah,
as you move from
totally.
one place to another.
Yeah. So
Oh,
vertical, I you know, call this domain expertise or whatever that means.
yeah.
But yeah, like this is, I'm not saying that this is less valuable. I think this is just how you cut the jobs of the software that you're doing, right?
Right.
For your company, you're probably responsible for a lot more of the stack
Yeah.
than a horizontal company would normally be, because it's your
Yeah.
responsibility to serve the end user through whatever means necessary. So I think that makes sense. And in fact, so the way that people make really serious money from vertical software is through rollups. So Constellation Software is one of them. These guys own something on the order of a few thousand vertical businesses, and they just roll them up, and they're making billions of dollars in total based on all these shared software. Sometimes they share people, sometimes they share technologies, sometimes they don't share anything at all. But they're just very good operators and acquirers of vertical businesses like that. And then the other guy, so this is the Canadian version. And then the other guy in the US, I forget his name now. Oh man, this is gonna be, so all I remember is that he's the richest like in America.
Oh, Vista Equity
Robert
Partners.
Smith, exactly, this guy. Yes. And I was like, wow, he hit on this idea way before anyone else. So Vista Equity also owns a lot of like vertical software, but I mean it's so big now that they also own some horizontal stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, how many do they have? They don't really say. They don't really say, but it's huge. Um, someone drew out like the number of companies that these guys own,
Yeah.
and it's just amazing how much vertical software is in there. Don't even know, like, where is it? I mean, I hate these like appearing things. Does anyone have like a number they can pull out? I heard it's on the order of thousands. Like this is all the companies that they own. And probably like this is not the full amount as well. Anyway.
Wow.
So to me, this is the, like once a vertical software business has kind of stopped growing, based on like hitting the TAM that is supposed to hit, then you might want to, then you might operate it for profit, and you might want to sell it to one of these guys to do that, so that you can move on to something else. That's kind of where I think like all the mature vertical software companies should end up. But I'm sure, like basically, if it starts being large enough, then it starts to horizontalize, right? Like then you have legal infrastructure or legal operating systems. I don't know what it means, or legal sales and distribution. But like, if only if it's like too niche, then it stays vertical. Like I think all new industries start out vertical because you don't really know what the roles are here. You don't know what these individual boxes are here. So yeah, if it's a booming industry, then it's going to be horizontal. Otherwise, it's going to stay relatively tightly integrated.
Mm.
At least that's my very, very simplistic view of it. We don't have that much economic history to depend upon, right? Like imagine if you added like 500 years more of observations on this, we would have much more data to tell. But right now, the software industry as a whole, it's maybe 40, 50 years old, not that much data.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? I think Chad, you had one question.
Yeah, so I guess I've been kind of thinking about this as you've been talking, and it might be a little bit redundant, but like, I guess as individuals, is this more a matter of how we kind of succeed at the companies that we're joining,
Yeah.
or is it more a matter of, how else? Well, it's a more a matter of kind of like how you make decisions, like how you make decisions in, it might be again, it might be a little bit redundant. Actually, just because you said yeah initially, so just could you kind of elaborate on that, please?
I was going to say a second yeah as well. If your next part was also correct, so it's not, sometimes it's not an either or thing.
Oh, okay.
So basically, like, it sounds like you're asking how is this relevant to me, and that's why
Right.
in the first section I'm like, okay, this is why it's relevant to you, right? You make delivery estimations, you give advance warnings, you make technical trade-offs, you pick abstractions for scale, you evaluate commercial solutions versus custom solutions, you defensively code, you sweat details of accessibility and uptime, you find low-hanging fruit and suggest them to your product owners. This is very, very powerful. And all of this is basically you having to play some part of the role of a product manager and having to understand some part of your business model, right? So yes, it is, to answer your first part of your question, yes, it is for doing well at the job that you chose, but also it's for choosing the job that is a best fit for you, right? If you happen to be a superstar individual contributor, the agency model is amazing. Because you can get really recognized for your time and you can charge astronomical amounts. If you happen to be really good at acquiring attention at scale, the sort of ad-supported business model is really good because you're essentially building digital real estate that people bid for. That is Google, right? Like, this is not small.
Would you say dev advocacy is kind of like that, just going in terms of the advertising model?
It's very similar, yes. Dev advocacy has a bit of education as well, so a bit of pay people who are developers and good at good communicators to create content to explain how to use the tool and why it's interesting. So in other words, you're incentivized towards getting reach. Yes, that's the advertising part or marketing part. But you're also incentivized towards depth. Like, you're incentivized to get people all the way through to understand the full surface area of the product.
Okay, cool. You were saying about the rest of the models?
I mean, I can just keep going, like, but it's very much understand how your company makes money and therefore how you can help the company make money, and then make choices that are aligned with that, right? These are all the forms of technical choices that you make that are entirely within your control. You have very strong influence over. And if you are consistently making the right calls, then people will see that you're contributing to the business and they will have no choice but to reward you more.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So yeah, I feel like essentially all I would say is, like, I do strongly emphasize the importance of tech strategy for your career. I do think that maybe people are less interested in it. Whenever I focus on, like, the first part, like learn in public, everyone's like, yeah, great. But like, when it comes to applying this stuff in things that matter in terms of strategy and money, people feel a lot less confident when actually it might be a lot more impactful to the total comp that they might end up making in the end. So I highly encourage people to check it out. and I'm not the only person. I'm not the authority on the matter. In fact, there's a whole conference called the Business of Software. If you're very interested in this, more interested than me, all their lectures are public. And basically what I've done is I've gone through maybe about 10 years worth of their lectures. And it's just really, really good stuff. From each one of these guys are millionaires, just running their own business. Some of them are running very large companies, some of them very small companies, but all of them have a lot of really, really amazing experience, just running software businesses. So if you want to understand more of this, I would say that this is kind of the mecca of business software knowledge. And yeah, there's a lot of good stuff here that I'd love to talk with any one of you about it, because I have trouble myself finding people who are as interested about it. Like, some of this is very academic, but when it starts to matter, it starts to really matter. Cool.
I guess it's
Right.
also useful to so there are two things it's useful to understand what I found. One is in job hunting, if you understand the domain, like sort of touching on verticals, if you understand the domain, you don't have to just market yourself as a React developer. You can market yourself as a React developer who worked in this domain. That's definitely a selling point, or at least you'll get shortlisted. The probability of getting shortlisted is higher because we know you see the candidate knows the domain, right? And you don't have to just look for React developer. Your probability of getting picked is high if you go to a related company. And we have definitely seen candidates like that, like, oh, this guy has already worked in legal, and he will know exactly the terms when I talk to him about it. Like,
Oh yeah,
I don't have to teach the domain, right? So there is definitely that value. So it's as part of constructing resume, don't leave out that part. Like, if you know a domain, use that to your advantage as well. And the second thing is, like, once you join a company, I also found that partly why I took the role right now is like I'm more closer to business and learning how the business works. And the more we understand the business, it feels easier for them to talk to you, right? Like, otherwise there's usually like tech folks, we have our own meetings like this and we just talk about technology, right? And but knowing how to communicate with someone who's not in tech, who's in the business side, they feel more comfortable talking to you. So your job feels easier. Like, I found both of those have helped me.
that's true. That's true. That's why it's partially why I've actually been waiting for the right moment for me to re-enter the financial software industry, because I feel like I spent many years as a trader. I've now spent many years as a developer. I can talk the trader language, but I don't use it in my current job. And maybe there's someday that I might go back into that. One related podcast I really enjoyed recently, I'm going to post it in the comments. It's 6 Levels Down by Michael Lewis. This is the same guy that wrote Moneyball and a bunch of other really good books. But he has a podcast right now, and he talks about how they found they were trying to start an insurance startup, and they found this expert who just knew everything in her head about the insurance system, and they just interviewed her and wrote it down, and that became a multi-billion-dollar insurance company. It was pretty funny. So domain expertise and code is a really potent combination. Cool. Chad, you had a hand up.
Yeah. So, like, I guess what consists of domain expertise, and I'll give kind of an example because, well, yeah. So, like, I've done kind of like esports stuff for a good portion of my life.
Uh-huh.
Mostly playing Street Fighter, and there's some stuff that I'm particularly interested in because I have that interest in like helping kind of esports. So like an example is that, for the longest time, esports events would do their brackets on paper, and then we eventually got software like that can be readily available for tournament organizers to use. So that's something that I kind of thought of companies that I thought of joining.
Yeah.
But I kind of find it, I don't know, I find it kind of hard because it's like every time I kind of reach out, and to be fair, I'm in Jamaica, so it could be that, but I find it hard to like reach out to companies that are in esports in any way, or even specifically in the game that I'm in, and say, hey, I have this wealth of experience by being a hobbyist esports athlete for 5-10 years, but I still can't get I can barely even get the conversation started.
Yeah.
So I just kind of wanted to ask about that. Not specifically that situation, but just.
Yeah. So what is domain knowledge? Okay. I want to answer one thing about esports, and then I'll broaden out to domain knowledge. My one thing about esports is that it is so not all industries are created with the same amount of equality. What do I mean by that? Are you familiar with like the Gini coefficient? So Gini coefficient is a map of how rich the percentile of how rich somebody is. Gini coefficient, maybe distribution. Let's just call this perfect equality. If everyone had the same amount, then you would reach the red line, right? Which is the 60th percentile would have 60% of the population would have 60% of the income, right? The blue line below that is more realistic, and the area of the curve, B over A, is the Gini coefficient, and so the gaming curve looks more like this, more like 0 all the way until the 99 percentile, and then it shoots all the way up to the 100 percentile. Do you know what I mean? So it's more
Agreed.
The gaming industry, just like the writing industry, is more unequal than other industries. Like let's say if the food service industry would be much more equal because everyone makes roughly the same amount, right? In other words, you have to be that much better to win that superstar amount. So another way I like to phrase this is there are a lot of writers of children's books out there, but there's only one J.K. Rowling. And a lot of people judge themselves by the peak of the profession, and they wonder why they're not there without thinking about the fundamental distribution of that. The thing that drives the inequality is what is known as the economics of superstars. It's a very well-known kind of 1981 paper about how some industries lend themselves to more superstars than others. And when it's a very superstar-driven industry, only the top performers get all the money. Everyone else, you might as well not, like, just being 90th percentile, you might as well just be 10th percentile. Doesn't matter. So that's the thing about gaming, right? Like you to really stand out there, it's a lot more unequal than in other fields. I try to stay away from that, partially for that reason, but also just because I'm not a good gamer. It's good theory. I'm not really sure how helpful it is to you because it just explains the world as it is instead of prescribing a solution for the world. But I think it's a very influential paper. There was also a relevant New York Times article about this that talks about how superstars get the majority of the business. And I don't know, it's just the way things are. You can't really do anything about it because that's just how people like to work. People like superstars.
No, I completely agree. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to move on to the domain specific thing.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Domain specific thing, I think is very important. Like, so, the example with the legal software or the insurance person, or my example with like the trading, like we all know, like, as long as it's like law, trading, insurance, as long as you have specialized knowledge and all that. Like, I have a friend who's a chef. He used to be a chef in a restaurant, and then he learned how to do software development, and then he went straight to Blue Apron. And it was a really good domain expertise marketing for himself. Blue Apron ultimately, did not turn out to be a huge business at the end, but it got him the job, which he took on to go on to another job. That's like, I don't know. Like, I think it's basically you try to use whatever part of you that you have that might be relevant, might give you a competitive advantage. But when it stops becoming a competitive advantage, then maybe you can de-emphasize it. So sometimes I don't even tell people that I have a second degree in international relations because no one cares. I don't know if that helps, but essentially, like, sometimes they give you an advantage. Use it when it does. If it doesn't help you at all, then throw it away. It's fine. you have more assets than that you could possibly use.
So it just, I guess, it comes down to your experience to know which is helpful and which isn't, in a sense.
Yeah.
Thanks. No, I appreciate. I mean, to be honest, like, even just the earlier conversation, because I definitely agree there. The earlier conversation about the kind of the kind of superstar kind of status that you need to be to definitely, in my experience with the industry, I definitely agree with that. So it's just like I could probably stay away a little bit more, or maybe if I have the opportunity. But yeah, it just kind of really gives me an idea how to think about it. But I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Cool. No, thank you for asking the question. I really enjoy doing this, but also, like, I think it's a very valid question to ask, like, how is this relevant to me? And so you should always think about, like, how that is. It's funny because this strategy section is all like that. It's all like, what are the long-term trends and how does that affect my short-term? And sometimes it's very relevant, sometimes it's not so relevant. But I think it's always worth it to play games on 2 time scales, and try to figure out where you stand between those. Cool. I don't have much else. I only wanted to focus on this time and answer any questions. But if you have relevant thoughts on the topic throughout the week, Discord is always open. And if you have any other topics of conversation, we can also always pivot. But next week we'll try to cover the last part of the strategy section, and then we'll get into tactics, which is also very, very fun. So the last 2 will be strategic awareness, which is, again, how do you keep, like, now that you've figured out, like, overall, like, an approach to strategy, understanding, having a clear model of reality is a really good part of that. So we talked about this in sort of intro to strategy, where what is the definition of good strategy, right? Like, good strategy involves a mental model of present reality, vision of the future, plan for getting there. Vision of future is kind of betting on technologies and all that. Plan for getting there, and policy of what to do and what not to do. But having a clear mental model of reality, this is something I work on a lot. And you see me doing this quite often in like the essays that I write. And I think people respect others who have a better model of reality than them, and they're perceived to be experts. So I think the strategic awareness section is kind of what I think about when I think about that. And this is also where we get into the whole Wardley mapping stuff, which we talked about maybe a month or 2 ago. And then finally, we're also going to cover megatrends and how to bet on megatrends, which I think is kind of a kind. Strategic awareness of where things are today, megatrends are where things are going. So, and then that's it. Then we'll go on to tactics with all the fun Twitter stuff, marketing yourself, CFPs, and all that. So hopefully that's not too much of a drag, but I think hopefully this strategy section will help someone out there think about their own career strategy and tech strategy.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully you benefit from this as well. And, like, yeah, I'm also using your feedback to try to think about the next version of the book. So this is super helpful.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to call it. And of course, in order to end the session, I have to share my audio and then do this. Bye, everyone.